What's going on, guys? My name is Arrow, and in today's video, we are showcasing episode 2 of my 10 Divine Mapping Challenge. This is Ethereal Knives Lightpoacher. Let's go. Lightpoacher is a very powerful item that gives you 5% of physical damage as extra of each element per spirit charge. You get spirit charges by having Abyssal jewels in your build, and then you gain them in a map from killing things. Every time you use a skill, you will expel one of those charges, and provided that that spell kills something, you'll get that charge back. So while you're mapping, you're pretty much always at max charges. Now, a lot of people who want to use this for bossing will find different interesting ways to make sure that your spirit charges are always on, so you have the most damage when you're killing bosses. But we're not killing bosses, so we actually get to use our spirit charges to help us clear. And because of how many we are casting, and the Nimbus ring causing those projectiles to come back, it actually adds a substantial amount of damage and clear to the build. Each Abyssal jewel that we have in our build gives us not only 1 spirit charge, but also 3% maximum life and 4% all elemental penetration from the Shroud of the Lightless armor. The build as is uses 12 Abyssal jewels. You could get that number even higher with a little bit more investment, but 12 provides us an absolute ton of life. So if you look at the PoE, you're going to see increased life percentage from tree is only 92%. I'm sure I'm going to get some comments saying, why is your percent life from the tree so low? And that's because we don't need a lot of life on the tree, because all of our percent comes from our chest. We get a good amount of projectile speed to allow both our ethereal knives and our spirit projectiles from the helmet to return all the way to us, so we get double hits on all enemies. This build actually cost me less than 6 divines to put together as is in its entirety, including any sort of weird jewels, gems, things like that. The ceiling for this is incredibly high. I think that with decent investment, you could be doing 100% deli, throw maybe a headhunter into this, and this would be a really, really fun build to do high-end mapping with. But as is, it destroys maps. It was so much fun to play this. You don't have to aim anything. The screen pretty much gets full cleared, and it actually feels pretty tanky. I'd say the one downside of this build is that we don't really have good, consistent corpse removal, and we're only freezing sometimes, which means things like detonate dead strongboxes and any other sort of corpse destruction can still hurt us. I found that really the only thing that would kill me is the detonate dead strongboxes, and I'll be honest, it killed me fairly often because I tend to not read the strongboxes. I dodge away quick enough to avoid the Ice Nova and then kind of go back in, and it's not great. But if you can just avoid those mods, this build actually feels really, really tanky to map with. So with all that said, let's jump into the gear and try to get through this nice and quick and get you guys playing as soon as possible. Okay, let's jump in and talk about the gear. So the way this works is we are building around the Lightpoacher helmet, which gives us spirit charges for each Abyssal jewel that we have affecting us. So the idea is on our gear, we want to get a bunch of them. We have 2 in the chest, 2 in the belt, and 1 in the helmet. You can get 2 in the helmet. It's a little bit more expensive. This is a 1C helmet as is. So the Lightpoacher gives us those spirit charges, and then every time you kill an enemy, you gain a spirit charge. When you use a skill, you expend a spirit charge, and it causes projectiles to fly out from you. These are not huge damage projectiles, but they are enough where, alongside of the faster projectiles, they're going out and coming back and hitting enemies twice and clearing a lot of trash for us. It adds a little bit of single target damage, but it's mostly just to help with clear. As you shield charge around the map and use your ethereal knives, you're going to be spamming so many of these projectiles that it really, really helps with clear. The other reason that we stack Abyssal jewels is because of the Shroud of the Lightless. This gives us 3% life per Abyssal jewel. I think we have 12. That's 36% increased maximum life. On top of that, we have 4% elemental penetration per jewel. So times 12, that is 48% pen. This is an incredibly powerful chest. It also gives us a huge amount of energy shield for our Eldritch battery pool. For the weapon, we're using Dusk Dawn. This is not used very often. I think a lot of people forget about this item. You use a Shade of Solaris and a Light of Lunaris. You combine those 2 items with, I think, an Orb of Fusing and sell it to a vendor, and then you get in return the Dusk Dawn. This item gives you 35% block, which is pretty good baseline block for a staff. Then it gives you crit chance, it gives you Elia's extra chaos, a bunch of multi, and a bunch of spell damage. This is just an all-around phenomenal staff, and it cost me about 15C. Now, what I would recommend that you do to 6-link it is use a Fall Orb, corrupt it. If you break it, you just buy another one. corrupt it, and then use Tainted Fusings to 6-link it. I had about 5,000 fusings, so I just 6-linked this myself. Now, I got very lucky. It only took me a couple hundred, but the best way to really do this is with Tainted Fusings. Because the base is so cheap, you can make a few of these if you happen to break the first one or two. You know, it maybe costs you an extra 10 to 15 C each time that you try to corrupt it. For the amulet, this is huge. 15% call, it's just 15% more damage. It's really, really nice, especially for a build that is mapping focused. That means bosses just have 15% less health. Then we solve huge amounts of stat issues with this item, and the implicits are actually not that important. You want to make sure that you have the Searing Exarch dominant in order to get that cull, and then you just get any 2 mods that are useful for you. I recommend just doing a search for pretty good stats, so you don't want to divine an item like this, but has pretty good stats, pretty good defenses, and then just find ones that have good implicits for you. And I think I spent 10C on this. For our rings, this one is just a bunch of chaos res and elemental res, nothing special here. The Nimbus ring is just about as cheap as it's ever been. I got this for around 2 divines, maybe a little bit more. This price will fluctuate. It's been under 2, it's been a little bit over 2, but around 2 divines is what you can expect to pay here. This is probably our most expensive item, and it allows your projectiles to return to you, effectively giving you 2 hits per cast and then 2 hits per Lightpoacher Spirit Burst. So just double damage, and it is just a phenomenal ring for coverage and single target. In our gloves, we get cold conversion. The original goal was to get full conversion of our ethereal knives so we could do fizz reflect maps, but ultimately I discovered the hard way that Lightpoacher also does physical damage. So if you don't fully convert this, then you are going to die to that. So full conversion, not that important, but it does give you more damage. So I got 40% here. I have Anomalous Fist of Lightning here, so we are at 100%. Then you just want life and some res and spell suppression as needed. The boots, another 1C item. We have permanent phasing, which is really nice from the Raider Ascendancy. So we always have the avoid projectiles and 5 pierces. And the Darkness Enthroned, we use this for adding some effectiveness to our jewels, but also just to give us more jewel slots. What I really needed, because I did not plan far ahead with this build for resist, is I bought all my jewels and then realized I didn't have enough resist. So I went and got one that had 50 something res on it. I pop it in here. Now it's got 100 something res, and I've got some res on this one as well. But you want to put your best jewels in here ideally, because it's going to almost double their value. Once you get above 90% effect of jewels, the price of this build goes up exponentially. So I would just do a search for 90 to 95%, see what you can afford. We'll talk about the Flasks quick. Taste of Hate, a little bit of fizz is extra cold, very nice for damage, and then fizz taken as cold is very, very, very nice for defense. We use Arumis to get us some more block. So between the 35% here and the 12% here, we actually have 47 block with no investment on the tree. That's pretty nice. When you combine block with a decent amount of evasion rating, you just don't get hit that much. So we also get armor there. And then on the rest of our flasks, we're looking for crit, evasion, and move speed. Okay, we'll talk about the gems. Ethereal Knives, we have a 21. It doesn't even have quality on it. That should have been an upgrade I made to get more proj speed, but it doesn't really matter that much. 21 is more important. We use Trinity because we do all 3 damage types. We use Anomalous Spell Echo because this gives increased cast speed as well. This is not too expensive, and it's a really nice damage boost. We're using Awaken Added Fire. As it turns out, getting a Crit Strikes gem is going to be more efficient. Then we use Pinpoint to give us more projectiles while we're mapping, and then for single target, it narrows the projectiles down. So for something like EK, we have plenty of projectiles, so it's not a problem if we don't gain any from Pinpoint. And then lastly, we convert the rest of our damage to lightning. This is actually not the best damage support we could use here. However, it does ensure that we have full uptime of Trinity. If you can find a way to balance your Trinity with different gems, that's absolutely fine. Something like crit strikes and crit damage instead of fire and lightning here are going to be definitely more damage. In the helmet, we have a Divine Blessing and a Vol Haste. It's really nice that Haste and Vol Haste pretty much line up within a second or two while you're mapping of when you can use them. So basically what I'll do is I'll run around, they'll both pop within a second or two, and then I'll hit them both at the same time. And then I get maybe 20 or so seconds until I have to use them again. It gives us a ton more cast speed and a ton more move speed while mapping. It feels really nice. We have faster projectiles in here to make sure that our spirit bursts return all the way to us. Without this, they do not. It's not the end of the world, but I like it better when the projectiles return all the way to me. In our boots, we have our Arrogance support for our Herald of Ash and Vitality, so that's on our life. And then we have our self-cast Sniper's Mark here that we use for single target. In the gloves, we have Petrified Blood, Determination, and Zealotry as our 3 auras that are on our mana pool. As long as you have more than 0 mana, you're good because we are Eldritch Battery. Then we have our Molten Shell, which is on our left click. I don't use Vol Molten Shell because I prefer Vol Haste, and I just like to have 1 Vol skill, so it fills up faster. And then in the chest, we have a 4-link setup for our Lightning Warp. Lightning Warp is a really fast way to move around the map, and having the Phantasmal version makes you go even faster. All right, let's talk about the Ascendancy. The reason that we chose Raider is for its really, really cheap quality of life. So permanent uptime of Onslaught, really nice to have. And then increased effective Onslaught. That means between these 2 nodes, we always have 40% cast speed and 40% movement speed. We also take some more Onslaught effect on the tree. This also gives us more of a chance to evade attacks. Avatar of the Chase is really good if you are medium to high investment in evasion. If you've got, 40% evasion chance, then this is not very good. It only gives you 4% more. But if you're at, let's say 80%, now you're up to 88% chance. So this makes it pretty easy to get to a really high evade chance. Then over here we get phasing, perma uptime, which is really good for our boots like we talked about. Also a huge chunk of spell suppress, saves us some points on the tree. And then Avatar of the Veil. While we're phasing, which is all the time, we have 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments. So between this wheel here and this life wheel, we have 100% chance to avoid all ailments. And then again, while we're phasing, which is all the time, we have exposure for all nearby enemies. When you're bossing, you're going to be close to the enemy anyway. So this will apply and we'll get exposure for all 3 elements for free, which is really, really nice. It's hard to get more than 1 version of exposure in a build. So our tree is a little funky looking. Some things that we needed: Pain Attunement, Eldritch Battery, so we had to come up here. And then we came down here because we had to get this Avoid Ailment stuff. And then we just grab spots where we can put jewels. We have 12 jewels, I believe. You want to get as many as possible. Long shot's really nice to give us projectile damage as well as speed, and then more projectile speed from the mastery. This wheel, I would say this wheel is optional. Because we invest into armor and evasion, this is a really nice way to boost that up. It also gives us spell suppression and then onslaught effect. So this is just a really nice defensive quality of life wheel. For our large cluster, I would get something better than this, but Sadist is mandatory in my opinion. We were always chilling, shocking, and igniting, so all of that damage is full uptime. And then we get our Leech from Doriani's. So these 2 are really nice to have. If you can get Leech elsewhere, then you can get something else. This is only a 2-node cluster, which is really bad. But again, this build costs around 6 divines, so you can spend a little bit more to get a better large cluster. For our mediums, we get Repeater for damage and cast speed, and then Streamlined for projectile speed and damage. Getting 2 of those gives us 40% more projectile speed, which really, really helps. And then we grab some crit, we grab some suppress, move speed, get +1 intensity from the caster mastery. That gives our pinpoint even more single target damage. Unfortunately, I'm not taking the open nearby chest when you cast a spell node. I really want to. Part of me wanted to drop this stuff over here and take this dual wield movement speed wheel to get us a little bit of damage, but also the nearby chests. But ultimately, it wasn't that worth it. So that's pretty much it for this build. It's got a lot of nice quality of life, full ailment immunity, a ton of speed, good amount of block, evasion, and it feels really, really nice to map with. Now, can you boss with this? Not really. Without finding a way to get full uptime on your spirit charges, you lose a ton of damage. Now, I did go and kill Exarch with this, but I died, I think, 5 times on the way to do that. You just lose all of your damage without spirit charges. I tried to use a Vault Breach, but the problem with that is in order to generate souls, you have to hit the boss 1,000,000 times, and I never even got to use it. I killed the boss before I got to use my Vault Breach. So then you could go for something like a Soul Ripper, but I just didn't want to get into all that because this is not a bosser. This is a mapper. There is also tech to put in the helmet where you could make it so your charges are never expended, but I really wanted to make a build that used the Spirit Burst skill and didn't just hold on to the charges for damage. All in all, this was a blast to map with. For only 6 divines, you get a ton of mapping damage. You could easily turn this into a 50 divine build by really diving deep into the jewels, getting helm enchants, boot enchants, but really getting good abyssal jewels. You could add so much life, so much damage, and this is something that's actually really tempting for me to consider maybe for next league, building a character just like this for mapping, except going hard into the jewels and spending a lot more currency on them. I basically tried to spend between 10 and 20C on every jewel. So the ceiling for this really, really high. It was an absolute blast. If you like Ethereal Knives, you're going to love this build. So I hope you all enjoy. If you want to support me, you can like this video, you can drop a comment down below, or subscribe to the channel. If you want to support me financially, you can click that link to my Patreon in the description. Or just come check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0__. We'd love to have you over there if you have questions about this build or any other build that I have created. So thank you so much. And as always, take care.